After decades of silence, Sigourney Weaver is finally speaking out, and the truth about Alien will shock fans. At 75, the legendary actress is revealing what really happened behind the scenes of the iconic sci-fi thriller that defined her career. From intense sets to hidden challenges and secrets no one knew, Weaver's confession changes everything we thought we knew about the making of the film. For decades, fans speculated, but now the real story is finally out. First, when Sigourney Weaver accepted the role of Ellen Ripley in Alien, 1979, she was stepping into territory that felt, at the time, wildly foreign to her training and instincts. Weaver was a classically trained performer, shaped by the rigor of the Yale School of Drama, where emphasis fell on text analysis, emotional architecture, and the lineage of stage performance stretching from the Greeks to Shakespeare. Science fiction cinema, especially in the late 1970s, was not where prestige actors typically imagined building a serious career. For Weaver, the project came with uncertainty, even hesitation. She admired the script, respected Ridley Scott, and understood the conceptual power of the story, but she still questioned how she, a stage-focused actress, could anchor a monster movie without losing her dramatic integrity. So she built a private technique, a mental reframing that allowed her to inhabit Ripley with the same depth she would bring to a classical heroine. Weaver has since revealed that during filming she quietly pretended she was performing Shakespeare, specifically Henry V. She explained the trick succinctly. "I just pretended I was doing Henry V the entire time. I thought, well, as a woman, I'll never be cast as Henry V, so this is my Henry V." It was not a joke. It was an acting philosophy. By approaching Ripley as though she were tackling one of the most complex leadership roles in the Shakespearean canon, Weaver created a psychological bridge between high drama and genre cinema. This approach gave her an internal compass. Instead of playing Ripley as a trope, the final girl, or the crew member running from a creature, she grounded every beat in authority, discipline, and moral seriousness, much like Shakespeare's young king preparing for war. The quiet resolve, the clipped commands, the escalating assertiveness. These were not accidental choices. They were built on a classical framework that treated Ripley as a commander whose decisions carried weight, consequence, and a sense of destiny. Weaver effectively infused the character with the gravity of a stage monarch transplanted into deep space. The result transformed both her career and the franchise. Ripley's presence in Alien differs from most late 1970s genre performances precisely because Weaver refused to treat the film as disposable entertainment. The Shakespeare lens made Ripley psychologically coherent, disciplined, and emotionally guarded, qualities that later defined her across multiple sequels and helped rewrite Hollywood's understanding of what a female protagonist in an action or sci-fi film could be. Second, when development began on Aliens, 1986, the long-awaited sequel to Ridley Scott's 1979 classic, the biggest creative and logistical obstacle wasn't the script, the budget, or the escalating scale of James Cameron's vision. It was securing Sigourney Weaver. By the mid-1980s, Weaver had become a respected dramatic actress, and her schedule, compensation, and artistic expectations had all changed dramatically since the original film. Yet both Cameron and producer Gale Ann Hurd understood that Aliens simply could not exist in any meaningful form without Ellen Ripley. Ripley was the emotional anchor of the franchise, and Cameron's entire screenplay, written before Weaver officially signed, was built around her trauma, resilience, and transformation from survivor to protector. But the studio, anxious about budget inflation and the rising cost of securing Weaver, hesitated. The negotiations slowed. The possibility emerged, at least in the minds of studio executives, that Ripley might not return. Cameron and Hurd realized that if they continued insisting Weaver was indispensable, the studio might dig in further, creating a stalemate. So they employed what Weaver later described as a clever psychological gambit. Cameron deliberately told the studio that they might make the sequel without Ripley, and therefore without Sigourney Weaver. He floated the notion with just enough seriousness to shift the leverage. Perhaps Aliens could be reconceived with new characters. Perhaps the franchise didn't need to follow Ripley's arc at all. This was never Cameron's real intention. He knew the film he wanted to make, and that film needed Weaver at its center. But the suggestion served its purpose. Studio leadership, suddenly confronted with the image of a major sci-fi sequel without its signature protagonist, moved quickly to secure Weaver. The threat of losing Ripley, even hypothetically, reframed her presence not as a negotiable luxury, but as an essential creative pillar. Weaver has spoken about this maneuver with amused appreciation, noting that Cameron and Hurd used reverse psychology in a moment when the studio needed to feel it was making the pragmatic choice. And the tactic worked. Negotiations accelerated, the deal was struck, and Weaver signed on to reprise the role. Only later did she learn that Cameron never intended to direct a Ripley-less sequel, and that the tactic had been a bluff designed to protect the integrity of the film. Third, during the production of Aliens, 1986, the physical demands placed on Sigourney Weaver went far beyond the typical expectations for an actor in a studio-backed action sequel. James Cameron's filmmaking style was high-intensity, tactile, and deeply committed to practical realism, and nowhere was this more evident than in the infamous sequence involving the destruction of the alien nest. For the scene, Weaver, as Ellen Ripley, had to tear through a mass of fibrous, web-like material that production designers created to mimic an organic, almost cocooned environment. The substance looked like bone, cartilage, and webbing fused together. But behind the eerie effect was a material Weaver later described as spidery spun glass, fragile, sharp, and unpredictable. Before shooting, Cameron reassured her that the material was safe to handle. He insisted that the structure, though menacing on camera, had been engineered so it wouldn't cut, scrape, or injure her during the violent ripping motions required for the shot. Weaver trusted him. After all, she had already developed a strong working relationship with Cameron, who directed with precision and often physically demonstrated the actions he wanted from his actors. So she approached the task with confidence. But once the camera rolled, the reality proved far more treacherous than the assurances suggested. As soon as Cameron called, "Action!" Weaver launched into the sequence, pulling apart the dense webbing with force. Almost immediately, she felt the sharp sting of the material slicing into her hands. She later recounted the moment with dark humor. "Then action. I do it, and I'm bleeding like stigmata." The cuts were real, the blood was real, and the pain underscored just how physically unforgiving the set pieces of Aliens could be. The incident highlights the core truth of Cameron's filmmaking style. He pursues a level of authenticity that often places actors in environments that are cold, heavy, abrasive, or outright hazardous. The next sequence was shot under intense lighting, surrounded by practical slime effects, smoke, and cramped, jagged set dressing. Weaver's commitment to performing her own physical actions, tearing through the nest, maneuvering the flamethrower, and maintaining Ripley's emotional ferocity, required endurance more commonly associated with stunt performers. It also illustrates the broader ethos of the Aliens production. The film's gritty realism was achieved through real exertion, real strain, and, in moments like this, real injury. Weaver's experience tearing through the razor-like spun glass nest exemplifies the intersection of performance and physical risk that defined the movie. Her willingness to push through the discomfort, stay in character, and deliver the intensity Cameron needed became a key component of why Ripley's actions feel so visceral and convincing on screen. Fourth, among the most iconic moments in Aliens, 1986, is the climactic, explosive declaration delivered by Sigourney Weaver. "Get away from her, you bitch!" The line has long since become a landmark in sci-fi cinema, endlessly quoted, referenced, and parodied, and widely regarded as one of the greatest hero moments in an action film. Yet Weaver has recently revealed a surprising truth. At the time of recording the line, she felt she didn't deliver it correctly. Weaver explained that in the heat of the performance, Ripley confronting the alien queen in a mechanized power loader, she instinctively pitched her voice upward rather than grounding it in her lower register. She described the vocal choice with self-deprecating humor, saying she sounded like a little nerd instead of the deep, commanding tone she felt the moment required. In retrospect, she considered that choice a mistake. But interestingly, James Cameron, who is famously meticulous about line readings and emotional calibration, approved the take immediately. This contrast between Weaver's internal critique and the audience's reception is striking. From her perspective as a classically trained performer, voice control is a precise tool, a way of shaping authority, emotional intensity, and character presence. In her mind, Ripley's confrontation with the Queen was the apex of her arc, a moment of courage, maternal fury, and defiance. She felt the line should have come from a deeper, more grounded place. The pitched-up sound, to her, undercut some of Ripley's gravitas, but Cameron saw something different. A line that rang with adrenaline, desperation, and raw emotional charge. In the context of the scene, Ripley is not calm. She is not performing dominance the way a Shakespearean general might. She is a mother on the brink of losing a child she has vowed to protect. The slightly higher pitch, the edge in her voice, may have suggested not weakness, but ferocity under strain, a kind of instinctive, protective rage. Cameron believed that authenticity mattered more than vocal perfection. What makes the anecdote especially compelling is the divide between performer intention and cultural legacy. For decades, audiences have celebrated the line precisely as it exists in the final cut. It became a rallying cry for strong female characters, a defining act of rebellion against sci-fi tropes, and a tone-setting moment for the entire action genre. Weaver's personal discomfort with the delivery adds an unexpected layer of complexity. The actress herself once wished she had pushed harder, sounded stronger, or delivered the line with a different register. This disconnect underscores a broader phenomenon in filmmaking. The audience often mythologizes moments that the actors themselves view through a microscope of craft and self-critique. What Weaver considered an imperfect vocal choice became, in the eyes of fans, an immortal cinematic punch. Fifth, one of the more interesting facets of Sigourney Weaver's perspective involves the very setting of the series. In interviews, Weaver has made clear that she was not enthusiastic about the idea of transporting the story from the isolated, claustrophobic confines of outer space to Earth. In one Reddit-sourced quote, she stated that she didn't want Alien to go to Earth. While the remark is anecdotal and reported via secondary sources, it reveals a consistent theme in her thinking about the franchise. The horror space environment was not incidental. It was central to the story's identity. For Weaver, the setting was more than a backdrop. It was a character in its own right. The original Alien, 1979, directed by Ridley Scott, established the sense of isolation, dread, and unknown danger that made the film revolutionary. The industrial labyrinthine corridors of the Nostromo, the void of space, and the alien ship itself created an atmosphere in which the eponymous monster could feel genuinely unstoppable. By keeping the story off Earth, the narrative could maintain the tension of the unknown. Weaver seemed to understand that relocating the alien to a terrestrial environment risked diluting that tension, making the monster more familiar and the horror less potent. Her perspective underscores a critical understanding of genre storytelling. Setting is not just scenery. It shapes the audience's emotional and psychological experience. Weaver's thoughts on the setting also reflect her respect for the franchise's tone and the creative choices of the original filmmakers. As a trained actress from Yale School of Drama, she approached her work with serious consideration for narrative logic and dramatic coherence. The idea of grounding the story on Earth might have seemed to her like a step toward conventionality, potentially compromising the uniqueness that made Alien stand out. Indeed, the terror of Alien stems largely from its isolation, a horror that thrives when characters are far from help in environments they cannot control. By advocating for the story to remain in space, Weaver was implicitly defending the structural integrity of the suspense and the stakes that gave her character, Ellen Ripley, room to develop as a resourceful and resilient figure. This point also highlights Weaver's thoughtful engagement with the franchise beyond her performance. Many actors approach roles primarily from the standpoint of character work, but Weaver's attention extended to world building and thematic fidelity. By emphasizing the importance of the space setting, she demonstrated an awareness that a story's environment can be as influential as the plot or the monster itself. Her perspective resonates today because the Alien franchise has, over decades, expanded to explore various planets, space stations, and eventually off-world colonies, but rarely Earth, preserving the sense of otherworldly menace that she championed early on. What do you think about Sigourney Weaver's revelations about the movie Alien? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.